Ni awgan mangke. Ni de bepa hori goi tandar. Oh, dah huri ha, muda dengan hari. Donna mesan, ewati alamari. Huri ha, itu yang kami dia. Mihiri, kena kan, ini kan unda, kon tengah rapor ama. Dia foto, mihira, foto ke mihir sama passport, foto. Algon kau berapa? Mihir passport.
I stand before you as a representative of an endangered people. We are told that as a result of global warming and sea level rise, my country, the Maldives, may sometime during the next century disappear from the face of the earth.
ඔmme මෝසුමකව සම ගිරාන් එකම පහ ඉතරකම මේ ගෝඩේ මිටයි. අම එක්පහරන් අනින් එංගහරන් අනින් අහර දා වෙලිගන මෙතන කාම්බරා යා දෙන්න වෙවේ. මේ වාගතකි හම පහර කවුරුන් බොඩ ගිරමුන් ගොස් මේ ගෙතකුග මිහාරමි අහිස් දුහන ගායකන මෙතන මේ අඩ්ඩියවරක ෆෝටෝ බේර ඔය තනෙත් තෝරීග. මේගේ දිහ ආහාර කුරින් පෙරකින් කොම්මේ ආහාරක සම අන්නනේ ගිරමු. දැන් ඒතර මේකන් හල්ලු කරා මසකතෙන් නොකර වේකම වෙජ්ජියා මේකන් හල්ලු නොවෙජ්ජියා
In December 2004, the deadliest tsunami in history hit Southeast Asia. 1.7 million environmental refugees, 270,000 dead. Several islands in the Maldives archipelago were completely destroyed. Ironically, it took an unprecedented natural disaster for the president's pleas for help to finally be taken seriously.
කමියද නැති කඳවද ගොලේ නැතිගෙන් අම ආස්මිති බෙනේ. ඉංහම ජීගෙන් නොම මෙතමි උලෙනෙකි. ඉංහම ජේ දුවා කිරාතු කරවි එම්මෙන් එප්පස්වා දුවාකෝ.
ඌණු බාරේ පුංජ සූරුම් බාරලා ආයිලා. මේ ජලෙල්ලා මිතිබෙන්න මරනවා.
තුනිවීම අයිස්ත විරේගේ බාරුවේ ලොණුගඩ මච්චන් උෆුලුනීම රත්තන් අඩිය කනොන්දාන.
කඳවල් දින කඩු කාරීග කඳවල් කාරිය ෆීපදිය කමිටන්ඩන් දෙෆීපතිය ඒ බානජ්ජක ආරම්භ නුකතා ගන්න එක්ගද කර.
එරසුන් අනේ රස හිජර කරම් ජීවුනේ වන්දේ මානේ කාල ගොතන්.
There are many reasons why people become environmental refugees. As we look to the future, it's quite clear that one of the biggest driving factors will be global warming and the extreme weather events that come with global warming. But ironically, many people may also become environmental refugees as a consequence of the failed economic development model, which has been exported from the capitals of the rich countries of the world. Partly because the economic development model that we're exporting places a huge emphasis on the using up of natural resources. In some cases, people may become refugees because of deforestation. In other circumstances, people may become refugees because their way of farming gets displaced by people coming in and planting great swathes of monoculture. In other ways, it could be trees or it could be other forms of crops. It may be because engineering firms have argued that there should be a huge new dam in an area so a valley gets flooded. But this model of very centralized, high-tech development, which is much more focused on meeting the needs of elites rather than meeting the needs of people in villages and at the community level, can also drive people to become environmental refugees.
Il y a aujourd'hui plus de réfugiés environnementaux.
There are more environmental refugees than political refugees. But no one takes care of people who have had to leave their land, their village, their town because of a natural disaster or because their environment was destroyed. These people are completely abandoned and they fill the shanty towns of Africa, Latin America, and South Asia. That is absolutely scandalous.
Over the last 3 decades, the Brazilian paper industry has ruined thousands of farmers by dispossessing them of their land. Around the town of Vitória, roughly 100 villages have been expropriated and turned into eucalyptus plantations.
Nós vendíamos a terra porque todo mundo estava vendendo, porque quem estava comprando falava que a gente não podia ficar lá, porque ia plantar calipe como plantou. E depois que plantasse, a gente não podia mais morar lá, nem possuir mais terra lá.
Inclusive, no lugar que a gente morava assim, na nossa casa, a gente tinha muita plantação. Tinha pé de coco, pé de cana, tinha bananeira, tinha pé de laranja, entendeu? Tinha a mesma coisa, que não precisava nada para comprar nada para comer, praticamente nada. Até carne a gente não comprava, porque a gente tinha criação de porcos, criação de galinha, muita manufatura mesmo, graças a Deus, tinha. Pegaram essa terra, não compraram não, né? Tomaram essa terra para plantar o caribe, para fazer história de papel, nós estamos sendo consumidos. Não só eu aqui, minha mãe, como meus irmãos, como todas as pessoas que tinham terra lá. Tudo foi consumido através desse papel aí. Se enriqueceram, essa empresa aí está se fazendo lá fora, o nome dela lá fora, através dessa terra.
The government here has always been a great ally of Veracruz. When that type of a company enters a country, it has to enter the government first. It finances representatives on a large scale. It finances electoral campaigns. It even finances the courts of justice. There are pictures of the president of Veracruz, a Norwegian man, shaking hands with Medici, Giselle, Figurino, Collor, Enrique, and now Lula. 6 presidents in a row captured on film with the company's president and CEO.
Pensei que não sei se meus pais pensavam que era grande dinheiro, que também ninguém conhecia dinheiro, meus pais quase não tinham quase leitura nenhuma, né? Se fosse na época de hoje, eu não deixava vender, porque minha pouca leitura que eu tenho, mas eu sei qual é o valor, né? Que vale, né? Mas não sei se meus pais foram tudo iludidos lá, por dinheiro e eu me sinto muito traído mesmo, eu não gosto nem de me lembrar disso, porque é uma coisa triste.
These big companies have committed a crime against humanity. They should be tried before an international tribunal for committing a crime against humanity, a crime against life. They've killed thousands of people, and that makes these companies criminals and murderers. Taking hope away from someone is worse than taking their life.
When one person or one group of people benefit from taking something by force from another group of people. And much of these environmental issues are actually crimes, but they are collective crimes. So we do not feel that we are criminals because we are doing it as a group. But in many ways, yes, we are criminal societies and we are taking away from people's basic rights.
They're rolling and rolling. Uh-oh, that guy is edible. But Scott Tissue has 350 soft absorbent sheets left.
Cloud bathroom tissue before it's cut into rolls. To make one very simple point, White Cloud tissue is kinder to skin. Kinder because it's softer than other tissues. And now White Cloud's been improved.
Toda monocultura é prejudicial.
Every type of monoculture is bad for the environment. But eucalyptus monoculture is the worst. It takes up a large amount of land, forcing thousands of farmers, peasants, and natives off it. It also uses a lot of pesticides. These plantations contaminate the groundwater, the earth, the environment. It's total destruction. A few people have resisted and stayed in the middle of the plantations, trying to live off land that is dry and unproductive.
Não conseguem produzir.
Problema foi dirigido daqui da Aracruz. Que antes não tinha, viu? Antes daqui nunca secou córrego aqui, viu? Nós era rico de água e hoje água para nós aqui não existia. Para ter uma água tinha que cavar um buraco no chão para poder tirar água. Os córregos acabou com tudo. Não existe mais água. Um chefe da Aracruz que esteve trocando ideia comigo falou que um pé de eucalipto desse tem condições de puxar 140 litros d'água por mês. 140 d'água, cada uma ave dessa. Aí não tem água que aguenta, desaparece com tudo. Bebo água tirada lá embaixo, distância daqui para lá mais ou menos uns 700 metros para apanhar na cabeça para poder beber. Cavado um buraco no chão, porque no córrego não tem, que secou tudo, nós estamos cavados um buraco no chão para poder tirar. Assim, a gente usa também com muito medo ainda, porque com muito produto que a Aracruz coloca aí, então corre a água para lá, você já bebe com medo de dar algum problema, né?
If, for example, I buy a piece of paper which contains some pulp from Aracruz, even if I know about the problem that is being caused in Brazil, I do not feel a personal responsibility for it because I'm just one of millions of people who are buying that paper. I'm just one of millions of people who are going to the petrol station and buying that oil. No one takes personal responsibility for issues like climate change because everybody is saying it is someone else's responsibility to do something.
Environmental refugees are no longer concentrated only in southern countries. Environmental deterioration knows no borders.
Well, we moved here 14 years ago to try and do some farming, and we bought this piece of land because it didn't have any oil activity on it. We have all around us, but none right here. And so we were happy with that. And then last year, it was announced to us that there was going to be a number of sour oil wells in the area. And because of that, we lost our sale of natural beef. And we were just beginning to get established in that.
One well that they've applied for right now is about 800 meters across the fence over there. They've proposed a well, we're fighting it, but so far we haven't heard anything whether it's going to go or not. And then they're proposing one over the opposite way, about 400 meters from the house. So if there's ever a leak at any of these ones they're drilling right here, immediately here, chances of us getting gassed out in the house is just about 90%.
In major sour gas incidents around the world, the people are dead before the phone call is even made to tell them that there has been a leak.
We spoke to various government officials about it, and they basically told us that we could move. And so that's what we're doing. We've got no hope. They're not helping, and I get really emotional. I'm sorry.
And then the other thing, you fight these oil companies and they single you out and come after you in every way they can.
And so does the community. Bill's been accosted at the pumps when he's been fueling up, and people have gotten all over him because they think that he's trying to stop economy from going. And if they'd open their eyes, they'd only see what will happen. But greed is running it. It's all greed.
And the way that the Alberta government's working, they don't care anything at all about the people or the agriculture or anything. All Mr. Klein and his associates wants is the oil. And if they're sour, they'll drill it.
Well, in Alberta, unlike Texas, the government or the Crown owns all the minerals under the ground. The government then leases rights to companies to develop these resources. Residents really don't have any recourse to not having a sour gas well placed 500 meters from their home. They are often told by the regulator itself that if you don't understand that oil and gas is part of the lifeblood of Alberta, then maybe you should move somewhere else.
So, what can a person do? We're displaced. We move. So we have no recourse.
Alberta is the Texas of Canada. At the same time, Alberta is also the gas tank for the United States. Without oil and gas from Alberta, the United States would have had to increase its imports abroad. One of the most controversial aspects of Alberta's oil and gas industry has been the sour gas industry. Sour gas is gas contaminated with hydrogen sulfide
It's gas that comes from very deep in the earth. Some people call it hell's gas. It is highly toxic. The only other substance that's quite as lethal as hydrogen sulfide is cyanide. And we have an industry that's become experts at taking hell and bringing it to the surface and refining it and turning it into so-called clean gas. But in the process, they're spewing 275 tons of sulfur into the air a day. They're contaminating groundwater around all these sour gas plants. And there are accidents and leaks that are affecting and displacing rural people on a yearly basis.
I don't feel safe here. I don't feel safe at all. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 wells right here that can kill us right now, all right? I don't see a benefit in that. It's just not fair. It's not fair at all they can do this. And this here is the creek that the beavers used to dam up all the time. And I remember asking them not to drill here. And so they wound up drilling 200 meters farther to the east. And when I asked them why, they changed their minds because it cost them a lot of money to move where they proposed to drill a rig. They said, well, we didn't want to disturb the beaver's natural habitat, but they don't give a darn about disturbing mine.
Around the world, what we call growth, what we call progress, is actually a separation of people from one another and from the earth, from their natural resources. And this distancing is, in effect, creating refugees from every country in the world, refugees from the right to land, to water, to clean air.
I don't want to live like this anymore. Forget the possibilities of getting sick from low-level exposure to H2S. Forget the exposure to the benzenes and toluenes and xylenes that are coming off these wells. Forget the carcinogenic properties coming off that exhaust stack for that glycol dehydrator. Let's look more at something that's not even looked at out here, is the stress. You talk to any doctor and he'll tell you that stress is a killer. I don't feel like I'm safe in my home. I don't know for sure if I'll wake up in the morning. Even worse, I don't know if my family will wake up, which drives me even worse around the bend. And that kind of stress, we should have some kind of rights. We should have some kind of protection. You should not have to live in fear. People who live in fear from other countries get to immigrate here as refugees. How come we're not treating our own people with that kind of respect? I've told our politicians, I don't like this. I don't feel comfortable about this. You get silence as an answer.
A healthy lifestyle where people can grow up in a family secure in the knowledge that the breadwinner of that family will have secure in employment is just as important, Mr. Speaker, as the issue of climate change. What we have to achieve is sustainability.
Think the decision to ratify the Kyoto Protocol doesn't concern you? Think again. Skyrocketing fuel and utility prices, tax hikes, and lost jobs are consequences that affect all Canadians. There is a better way. We need a made-in-Canada solution. We can balance emission reductions with continued prosperity. A message from the Government of Alberta.
the last time I move, I hope. And already I'm getting 2 operators telling me they're putting my new house in a planning zone. I haven't even moved there yet. But what are the options here? What are they going to do? Buy everybody's house? And what if they did? Where would we all live? Where would we go?
Mais ça tombe sous le sens qu'il y a un droit.
It stands to reason that we have a right to a livable environment, a safe environment. First of all, this human right has to be created. Then, we need an international agreement requiring all nations to protect environmental refugees, and an international authority that will take care of victims of environmental destruction.
De l'environnement.
Impacts of the actions of the rich and the powerful have been felt globally, and all of humankind's present and future generations may have to suffer the consequences. The words rare, endangered, and threatened are usually related to plants and animal species which, in their natural habitats, are confronted with the threat of extinction. With all the environmental hazards that loom large on our horizon, groups of humans may very well come to be described soon in these same terms or as environmental refugees.
We would create a Kaisaga, Kungali, the Tinker, Agun, the Common Algonum Harras, whom have a goal in it, Mahako Tinde, Algonum, Jam, Helative, Kirias, Aroli, Algonum, Safenboro, Keribu, Semboro. Of you were in a song and go enemy who come to all of you of you. I should me to other Faratuniva, Akedun Sulanding. Come on, Algonman Kirakuri, Duhakos Mikhail, Virkan, Hitavist when I get up, Miss a man. With Algonma Lagamorani, Mita Ammi, a Algon with those young who could jagger the Rifula and a Firimiha. Then Algon me, Hami, and Hami. Then Sarkar without Honani, they are hard way. They are die me here, I can live in a come. Never me that committee when they come. No egg there and they could joke a call, the reform, a dotative deficient could. A time I could joke me here by living on a wall. Sarkar, Miharum, Mitan, Mihia, he come and me who turn cut the vanilla. Algon Langati, me who now won't Darina Tafada, I won't delay me commit again any canone. Tsunamiga, Algonman may harm me hit that comedy, but hit that committee.
Narbi algono be bappa ani Nasir Ali therefore Ibrahim Nasir algon de kimi bappa e card was oti gega ani alemari ga rakka kuri fe card emmi miedo algon mi ayes as tantana che holwa balali ru bappa ralu aragen effaru fenono effan adikiri a photo gande be goto be salgon mi fenono.
It's very likely that the largest number of environmental refugees will come from some of the world's poorest countries, who neither have the resources to deal with the problem, and ironically, these countries usually had almost nothing to do with creating the problem, and it would be beyond an injustice to to expect the poorest countries with the fewest resources, who had least to do with creating the problem of global warming, to then expect them to deal with the problem afterwards. So the responsibility must be shared across the international community.
In 1992, 172 nations of the world recognized their share of responsibility for the planet's environmental problems by signing the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development. The first Earth Summit is considered an historic moment.
Human beings are at the center of concerns for sustainable development. They are entitled to a healthy and productive life in harmony with nature. To Brazil and to planet Earth.
Sadly, when we look at the rate of progress since 1992, we see that there hasn't been very much. And in fact, in many areas, some of the world's richest and most advanced countries are now, per person, pumping out more greenhouse gas pollution, contributing to the problem of global warming, than they were back in 1992. So we're still heading in the wrong direction.
Todas as plantas exatamente iguais uma da outra.
All the trees are identical. It's green, but there's no life. There are no living creatures, no birds, no water, no animals, no insects. There's nothing. No one can live there. It's green, but it's a desert.
Caçar e pescar o quê?
You're forbidden from fishing and hunting what? There aren't any fish. There aren't even any animals. What are you going to hunt? They suppress the poor and the community through propaganda and through the police force.
Essa daqui também é do mesmo material também, é do mesmo feitio dessa daí também. Essa é a casa de estuque antiga que havia antigamente. E hoje não pode fazer mais uma casa dessa, porque não tem onde tirar madeira para gente fazer uma casa dessa. Na Aracruz não pode tirar, dentro que é da gente não pode tirar, é proibido tirar. Então não existe mais madeira para fazer. Existe muita madeira, mas é que não é proibido tirar para fazer uma casa dessa agora, mas não pode tirar mais. Resistir ainda está resistindo ainda. Tem muitos. Tenho muitos amigos meus, tem um cunhado meu que mora ali naquela casa ali, viu? São tudo da mesma época, estamos todos resistindo. Aqui vai falar na beira da estrada aqui, tinha uns 2 ou 3 também, que é tudo da mesma época. E estamos se aguentando, né? Tem jeito, tem que se aguentar, né? Eu sou mais jovem, também venho aguentando também. Se eu sou mais velho, aguentei, também tem que aguentar, né?
When someone in Canada or in France, i.e. a democracy, says, "Listen, the problems are so big, there's nothing I can do about them. What can I do? I'm just one person, just one citizen." Well, that's wrong. You can do it all. If the governments of the North radically changed their policies, if they broke the International Monetary Fund's murderous policies, if they broke the World Trade Organization's murderous policies of ultra-privatization and ultra-liberalization, then right away, tens of millions of men, women, and children in the developing world would have a chance at life. Right away.
We need to completely rethink economics to understand that ultimately what feeds us and nurtures us is the soil and the water, is the natural world. So at a certain level, there is no distinction between the environment and the economy. We are dependent ultimately on natural resources, and natural resources have limits. If we print bits of paper and call it money and think that the way we're going to solve the world's problems is to look at the flow of paper money or electronic signals, we have lost our sanity. We've got to get back to basics to understand that ultimately everything we need comes from the earth in the material, economic sense.
Plantio de maracujá aqui. Daqui ainda tá boa essas frutas ainda. Isso é tudo trabalho do cupim, ó. Esse cupim, ele é remanescente do plantio do eucalipto. Aí eles cortam as árvores, passam novamente as máquinas, entendeu? Remove a terra, aí joga uns veneno fortíssimo que para se defender dos cupins. Aí os cupins que estão lá correm para cá, destrói tudo aqui.
Os pequenos agricultores, a gente vem sendo encurralado, vem sendo exprimido.
The small farmers are surrounded. They're locked in.
A entrar no ramo do carvão.
They've been forced to make charcoal out of the remnants of eucalyptus trees and then sell it. But one of the company's strategies to make farmers and peasants give up their land is to get them to start working in charcoal. And the people who control the charcoal industry are also multinational corporations. In the end, the small farmers get even poorer, and they have no other choice but to sell their land for next to nothing.
Oil and gas have always been a presence, but predominantly in the last 2 years have become more prevalent and more close to our area. I feel like we're surrounded. I feel like that they're moving in. It's like they're moving in and we're just getting surrounded by sour wells. We live where the heart is. These are proposed wells here. They'll be roughly 500 meters from our home. And these ones here will be, I don't know, I guess about a half a mile or so. This circle would be the evacuation zone. And all these people have to be consulted and shown how to shelter or where to evacuate to and where the roadblock signs are.
An EPZ is an emergency planning zone. And basically, it's a plan that says, look, in the event of an uncontrolled blowout or leak or other accident, these are the roads out, and these are all the people here. This is where the gas will be in its heaviest and most lethal concentrations. And it's the same kind of emergency response planning that you find around nuclear power plants.
Well, we're living in that zone if there's a problem. So apparently, we're insignificant. We'll be coming out in body bags if something comes.
In the fall of 2005, the Alberta government authorized the drilling of 6 oil wells on the outskirts of Calgary. These sites have a high content of hydrogen sulfide, and they place 300,000 people in an emergency planning zone.
But we have never drilled a well this close to the city in this population historically. So many people are raising the question, does this make sense to have a high-risk well so close to a large population? Is it feasible to think that an emergency planning zone could cope with the numbers of people that might be affected in a blowout? Well, most of us feel it is not acceptable to take that risk.
Predominantly, it's northwest winds, and that's what we check the flag to see which way the wind is blowing. So I guess if you have to leave, you know which direction you should go.
So if you had a release on a day like today, with this wind, it's 30-kilometer-an-hour winds, it would reach this point fairly quickly.
nobody ever pays attention till it's in their back door. And then all of a sudden they become aware of it. It's okay if it's the neighbors, and I guess I am guilty of that as well. I see what's going on in the world through media eyes, but I really never paid as much attention as I do now, because now we're there. And I think that makes a difference. I think so, because now I can put my feet in their shoes. Yeah, yeah. But people tell you it's good for you and it brings you wealth, but yeah, and that's probably what people are told in third world countries or whatever, that it's good for them. Yeah.
Eles jogam muito agrotóxico no eucalipto. As crianças estão ali brincando. Muito perigoso para as crianças. E sem contar que o ar, né, para as pessoas estar respirando ali. Há muito caso de infecção respiratória. As crianças ficam ali sempre com coriza, o nariz escorrendo, essas coisas assim. E agora, então, que eles queimam nos fornos aí, a madeira de eucalipto faz muita fumaça e ali pode correr problemas respiratórios, principalmente pneumonia. Então traz muito problema de saúde. Olha, o futuro é difícil de se prever um futuro assim. Enquanto esses eucaliptos estiver por aí, a gente vai ter que procurar meios para sobreviver, né? Eu vejo até que, igual eu estava vendo, as famílias já se sentem desanimadas, já não querem mais ficar no local. Se não tiver como dar um basta nisso, eles vão acabar querendo todo mundo embora.
I recall the day that the landman came to our door and sat at our kitchen table, as the custom on prairie farms is. You do your business around a kitchen table. I said to him, I have got an ideal life here. I don't want anything to change my life. And he assured me that it wouldn't. I never knew at that point that I would become a refugee.
It's warm.
Through and see if
The Graff family have developed serious health problems linked to hydrogen sulfide fumes. They were forced to sell their old farm at a loss, and they've been living in a mobile home for almost 2 years.
We never totally unpack. We're always ready to throw a couple things in, throw it in the truck and go, because it's so unreliable whether we can be here or not.
Once we are packed in the truck, we immediately drive out of the field and onto the road, not knowing usually exactly where we will go, depending on the time of year. And then we drive until we can find a place that is good enough for us to stay.
We can feel them or smell them or taste them. And because of that, we get sick. And so we have to evacuate, and at the best of times it's a few hours, but generally it's several days or several weeks at a time.
We move from location to location, trying to find a safe place to live. And I have talked to many people in Alberta who are in the same situation as we are.
Generally speaking, both the industry and government have done a very good job of minimizing the health risks of sour gas. And it's in their interest to minimize it. They, after all, are the ones that profit from it.
Well, on October 18th of 98, I was out walking on our old farm.
And it was just a typical Sunday afternoon. We were just doing what we do every Sunday afternoon.
There was a service rig on the well site on our farm, and they flared the well without notifying us, and I didn't know what was going on. It was a big roar.
So immediately when I heard that sound, it was shaking the house. The windows in the house were shaking.
So I walked up the hillside so I could look around, and I saw the flare down.
I realized that Daryl was out there, and I was frightened for his safety.
Within a minute or two, I started to get short of breath and couldn't get my air.
started to get weak.
And I opened the door for him to come in, and when he came in, it was sort of a coming in, falling down type thing.
And my face was just gray, ashen face.
But I didn't realize that there could be long-lasting, lifetime results from this.
And Darrell is very lucky to be alive, because if he had had any more hydrogen sulfide exposure for any longer, he might have been killed.
During the 1990s, when the studies were beginning to clearly identify sour gas as a really highly potent neurotoxin, I mean, that funding dried up. And requests for human health studies have been repeatedly put on the back burner. Even simple requests for a registry of people injured by sour gas, for workers injured by sour gas, has been repeatedly denied by the government.
Facilities containing hydrogen sulfide are not 100% airtight. Toxic gas leaks can occur, and they are almost undetectable. This possibility is what worries health specialists the most, because prolonged exposure to small doses of gas can lead to serious chronic illnesses.
We mapped on the province of Alberta the prevalence of multiple sclerosis in relation to health jurisdictions. And we found that Alberta is among the highest prevalence of multiple sclerosis in the world.
Barbara did not show signs of multiple sclerosis after the exposure, but Darrell did. The medical profession in Alberta gets a lot of support from the oil companies. They all depend, to a certain extent, on the oil company. And the oil company, unfortunately, this development has corrupted the entire social structure. So you'd think that you could go and get support. You could think, well, I can get support from a doctor, any doctor that I talk to, or maybe a specialist. No, it isn't quite that way.
We need to be able to measure the risks of cancer, of heart disease, of some of the chronic neurological diseases. We need to have some sense of what price are we paying for this development.
For me, eco-refugees are now the majority of humanity. And one very clear way of looking at this is to see that the primary producers, those that work with the natural resources to turn them into economic commodities, the farmers, the fishermen, the animal husbandry, nomads, all of them are being systematically marginalized.
We're finding that the pursuit of money by the oil and gas industries and the government allowing that to happen is displacing a whole way of life. This is perhaps the final generation that will be on what we know of as a family farm.
For environmental refugees, there's going to be nothing to go back to, and it's never going to be there again. We needn't fool ourselves about environmental restoration. In reality, it never happens. Areas that are destroyed for the oil industry, areas that are flooded for dams, areas that are affected by climate change or go under seawater are never coming back. One of the things which is very hard for humans to understand about climate change is that it is irreversible.
In the fall of 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the United States. This created 500,000 environmental refugees on American soil. Experts attribute the exceptional force of the storm to global warming.
I will not commit our nation to an unsound international treaty that will throw millions of our citizens out of work.
What do you know about the United Nations proposed climate treaty?
Isn't that about
global warming.
It would force the U.S. to cut energy use by over 20%. And higher energy costs will raise the price of almost everything we buy. Countries like China, India, and Mexico are exempt.
We pay the price, and they're exempt.
It's not global.
We're going home. We're out of here. We're somewhere.
Although we talk about the victims of climate change, for example, as if it is just the poor people who will suffer, it's very much going to be everyone who suffers, and some of the richest people in the world will suffer too. And that is why I'm optimistic and positive that there will be real change on this issue, because when everyone is a victim, everyone will take action on it in the end.
Rahuga MM Pava and Gos Huswe Dias, Algon was here, and Algon of Mitanum Vacuum. It got the best. Tana Vitana with Jung Hama. I think whiskey had an opera.
So for lots of reasons, we focus on the fate of small island states, and that's because they enable us to imagine. We see not just the vulnerability of one country, but perhaps the ultimate vulnerability of the whole of humanity in one place, in one time.